achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this edition of the show, we're taking a look at UFC on Fox 4, Shogun versus Vera. I'll be doing predictions for all 10 fights as this event goes down on August 4th, 2012 from Los Angeles, California, at the Staples Center, home of the Stanley Cup champion Los Angeles Kings. As always, I'll be providing a UFC on Fox 4 bet pack over at KamikazeOverdrive.net for only $10. I'm coming up a pretty rough night at UFC 149, but it was preceded by a number of good showings, including the last two events before this UFC 149. I had a combined 10-0 confidence lists between the two, 5 picks on each, and I went undefeated there. So certainly check it out. I know I didn't do great at the last show, but consider investing in here at KamikazeOverdrive.net and buying my bet pack for $10, especially if you bought it last time and didn't do well. Try it again. You'll find out that I'm not going to I'm not going to burn the house down every time I have a show and do well, but at the same time, if you buy it and consistently buy it, you're going to find you're winning more times than you're losing, and that's something I can almost guarantee in that sense. As always, thank you very much to all of my sponsors: MMABettingOdds.com, HeartandGlory.com, CouchFighter.co, MMACrips.com, the Adrenaline Training Center, boys over there, thank you very much. MMA Mountain, just any other website that allows me to host and post my videos, Blick Bloody Elbow and ShareDog, thank you very much to all of those websites as well. Head over to the KamikazeOverdrive.net. You can check out a very cool little article, UFC on Fox Events, Huge Accomplishment or Bitter Disappointment, written by my own Josh Harper, who's now writing for the website. An opinion piece. You can let us know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? The UFC on Fox deal, one of the biggest deals to come along in a long time in MMA, so please check that out and let us know, where you stand on the deal. That's enough for me. I think it's time to get into my first set of predictions. Our first predictions in the flyweight division, as Ulysses Gomez 9-2-0 battles 10-1 John Moraga, as both fighters making their debuts. Gomez has won back-to-back fights, and Moraga has won 4 in a row. Both these guys are predominantly submission fighters. Moraga has, of his 10 wins, 5 have come by submission, 1 by KO, and 4 by decision. While Gomez, on the other hand, 7 wins by submission, 2 by decision. So very interesting. Looking at Moraga, his lone loss against John Dodson. Ulysses Gomez, he's a BJJ brown belt, and he is predominantly, like I said, a submission fighter. He fought the Tachi Palace fights. He's a former flyweight and I believe former bantamweight champion as well. Yes, he won the bantamweight title actually in his last fight before signing with the UFC. One interesting thing with Gomez, he's taking this fight on short notice, and there is some thought that he has trouble making 125 pounds. That's why he has fought recently at 135. So I'm wondering if that won't play a role here. But the biggest thing that stands out for me is Moraga's experience. He's not fought on the level that Gomez has fought, and considering that in his last 4 opponents have had a combined record of 8-10, and that includes one guy with a record of 5-1. But you have other opponents with the records of 0-3, 1-1, and 2-5. It just tells me Moraga is not nearly on the same level as Gomez, experience-wise and talent-wise. He has power in his hands, and certainly that could be. And he's a pretty good grappler in his own sense of what we've seen. But again, that step up in competition could prove otherwise. As long as Gomez doesn't gas, I think he takes this one. So I'm going to take Ulysses Gomez to defeat John Moraga by submission. We now move to the UFC's featherweight division as Manny, the Anvil Gamburyan, 13-8-0, battles Michihiro Magawa, 13-11-1. Taking a quick look at what they've done recently, Gamburyan has lost 3 fights in a row to Jose Aldo, Tyson Griffin, and Diego Nunez, so 3 solid fighters there. Magawa, on the other hand, coming off a loss to Yuri Alcantara. Previous to that, he picked up a decision win over Jason Young, and then back-to-back losses to Darren Elkins and Chad Mendes. So these guys have fought a lot of the top fighters in the division, and certainly have had mixed results in both those situations. Taking a look at their win-loss totals, Michihiro 4 by knockout, 2 by submission, 7 by decision. He has lost 9 by decision, which is a huge number. On the other side of things, Gamburyan 2 by knockout, 6 by submission, 3 by decision, and he's lost 4 by decision. So both guys have had trouble when the fight goes the distance. Now both fighters have judo backgrounds, which should be interesting. I'll curious to see how it plays out. They might cancel each other out. We'll see somebody get a slight edge, but it might be a non-factor. What this fight comes down to me really is that Gamburyan in his fights against Diego Nunez and Tyson Griffin lost because of volume of strikes. He actually was able to land some takedowns in those fights, but because his opponents were able to outpoint him strike-wise, he lost the fights, and that's something Magawa I don't expect to do. Neither guy are dominant strikers. Gamburyan's got a big, powerful right hand, and Magawa has some skills, but he has that really interesting shoulder shift type maneuver to try and close the distance. I don't like it. I think it sets him up for counters, and he needs to be careful of Gamburyan's big overhand right. Looking at some numbers quickly, Gamburyan slightly outstrikes Michihiro Magawa in strikes landed per minute, and on a bigger note, Magawa takes on one more strike per minute, absorbs one more strike per minute than Gamburyan does from his opponents. I think that's where this difference will be decided on the feet. And I think when it comes down to if Gamburyan is able to land more strikes and absorb less, he wins this fight. So I'll take Manny Gamburyan to defeat Michihiro Magawa by decision. For our next fight, we move all the way up the ladder to the UFC's heavyweight division. It's 8-1-0. Phillip the Freeze takes on 9-3-0 Ole Thompson, the former strongman competitor. Both these guys are coming off knockout defeats. DeFries was shut down by Stipe Miocic, while Ole Thompson, in his UFC debut, knocked out by Sean Jordan. Now, we all know what Phillip DeFries is about. He trains with Alliance Jiu-Jitsu. 7 of his 8 wins have come by submission. His eighth win was a decision in his UFC debut over Rob Broughton, or it was predominantly grappling based. Ole Thompson actually has won the majority of his fights by grappling, but he doesn't quite, with submissions actually, doesn't quite come from the same grappling background as DeFries. Now, one common opponent I just mentioned, Rob Broughton, DeFries defeating him in his UFC debut, while Ole Thompson took him on back fighting in England earlier in his career and lost. What this fight comes down to for me is Ole Thompson should be the stronger man. His striking technique is nothing to write home about, but he's probably a little bit better with his striking than DeFries. But I like DeFries' grappling. He's going to have a 4-inch height advantage, and I believe 4 inches of reach as well, which should help him in the exchanges. But I look for DeFries to close the distance early and try and put Thompson on his back, and we've heard all kinds of times that technique and skill will beat strength every time. I think that's what this fight comes down to. DeFries will need to avoid getting tired having to grapple with the big Ole Thompson, but I think if he gets on top, he should get the advantage. And I'm going to take Phillip DeFries to defeat Ole Thompson by submission. For our next prediction, we now return to the featherweight division as Josh the Fluke Grisby, 14-3-0, takes on 16-7-0 Ohana Yaya. Taking a quick look what they've done, Grisby has dropped back-to-back fights to Dustin Poirier and George Roop in his first 2 UFC fights, and he'll need to pick up a win here because this guy was on the verge of a title shot prior to this, so he certainly could be facing his walking papers with a 3rd consecutive loss. Ohana Yaya, on the other hand, coming off a decision loss at UFC 133 to Jad Mendez. Prior to that, he had a decision win over Mike Brown, very impressive in that sense. Ohana Yaya, over his career, 16 wins, 14 by submission. He's a second-degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He has been knocked out twice. He's got 2 decision wins to his credit. He's gone to decision 4 times and lost as well. Grisby, on the other hand, 6 wins by knockout, 7 wins by submission, and 1 by decision. He's lost in each category 1 time. Physically, big advantage for Grisby, standing 5'11" compared to Yaya's 5'6", and he'll have a 74-inch reach compared to 68 for Ohana Yaya. The way I look at this fight is Grisby started off well, get outworked by Poirier. He started off well against George Roop, but eventually faded in that fight. Well, Yaya really impressed me in his fight against Matt Brown, where he was able to continually take him down, Mike Brown. He was able to continually take him down and is surprisingly strong. Yaya does not have any real striking to say that's going to do damage. He does kicks, but essentially it's all to set up the striking, or all to set up his grappling, I apologize. And basically what he's going to look to do is remain at distance, which will be fine with Grisby, and then as soon as the opportunity arises, dive in, go for a single, look for a body lock, any way he can get his hands on Grisby and pull him to the ground. And this guy, he's dangerous. On his back, he swept Mike Brown, which is no easy feat, as Brown is a very strong grappler, and Uriah Faber can attest to that. Either way, I like Yaya in this position to go in and use his grappling to outwork Josh Grisby, and I'm going to take Ohana Yaya to defeat Josh Grisby by submission. Moving right along, we jump up to the 205-pound weight class as Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis, 9-1-0, welcomes Wagner Prado 8-0 to the UFC. Davis is coming off a disappointing loss, first loss of his career to Rashad Evans back at UFC on Fox, Evans versus Davis. While on the other hand, Prado, undefeated in his career. He's certainly looked good of late. Now, one thing with Prado, he is a Muay Thai striker. 7 of his 8 wins have come by knockout. Will Phil Davis, American wrestler, 2 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 4 by decision. And this is a big thing for Prado. He's making his debut, but he's never faced an American wrestler by trade. All of his fights coming in Brazil against Brazilian opponents. He does come out of Team Nogueira, and certainly Nogueira has fought Phil Davis, so he'll certainly work with him on that. But just because I don't think Prado's going to be ready in that sense, to deal with Phil Davis's wrestling. Phil Davis, one of the top wrestlers, collegiate wrestlers in the UFC. Great takedowns, great top control, very strong, explosive, just all around a very good grappler. We saw what happened to him against Rashad Evans, and against Little Nog early on. When he's unable to get the takedown, he certainly has issues, but against Prado, he is a BJJ blue belt, and but his grappling defense is questionable. And I've read some interviews and some talk about him, and people just don't feel he's ready to deal with Phil Davis's grappling. In the footage I've seen, we haven't seen him in a lot of adverse positions, as he certainly has shown the ability to knock opponents out. And he has power. All but 2 of his fights ending inside the first round. A lot of them ending very quickly, including his last bout, which ended in 20 seconds. If he can catch Phil Davis standing, certainly could be another situation, but I don't see it happening here. And I've had success in the past predicting Brazilian underdogs making their UFC debut, looking at Charles Oliveira, Mikel Falco, and recently Hakran Diaz. I don't see it happening here, so I'm going to take Phil Davis to defeat Wagner Prado by submission. In our final preliminary bout of the evening, we're again in the UFC's featherweight division, as longtime UFC veteran 18-6-0 Cole Magrinho Miller takes on 17-11-0 Nam Pham of Ultimate Fighter fame. Taking a quick look at what they're doing, Miller returned to the featherweight division, made his UFC featherweight debut, losing to Steven Seiler by decision, while Nam Pham is coming off a dominant loss. Jimmy Hedges dominating Nam Pham back at UFC 141. And interesting fight here. This one really is a head scratcher. Now, looking physically how these two guys rack up, Cole Miller standing 6'1" compared to Nam Pham's 5'6". Cole Miller, so big advantage there. He'll have another 3 inches of reach, so that is significant. Now, one thing I look at Nam Pham, recent issues he's had with losses, he lost to Jimmy Hedges basically because he had no wrestling defense. Pham is an excellent striker, great boxing technique, good speed, really works the body well with excellent combinations, but Hedges basically negated all of that using his takedowns. A couple fights earlier, Mike Brown did the same thing using his takedowns. Over his career, Nam Pham has had trouble defending takedowns. Against Hedges, 11 takedowns. Against Brown, 5. In his loss to Leonard Garcia, he got taken down twice. Even going back to his Strikeforce days against Billy Evangelista, he lost as a result of being taken down 4 times. Cole Miller, on the other hand, does not present that issue in his UFC career. He's never completed more than 1 takedown in a fight, and he doesn't have the greatest takedown skills. And one interesting thing, Nam Pham made the transition. He is now training over at Alpha Male, and if there's a camp that you're going to work on your wrestling, it's Team Alpha Male with Faber and Mendez and all of those guys over there, all of those beasts. So definitely check that out. Certainly Nam Pham, we'll see if he has made some improvements. Cole Miller, on the other hand, in his debut, he didn't look the greatest. He took on Steven Seiler, but a couple things there. It was his featherweight debut for fighting there for a long time after fighting at lightweight, so that could have played a role as well. And he was fighting Steven Seiler in kind of a revenge fight after Seiler defeated his brother, Mika Miller, leading into the Ultimate Fighter. So certainly some emotions could have played in, but I wasn't overly impressed with Cole Miller. I thought he lost some strength, and certainly if Pham has a speed advantage and I think he has a boxing technique advantage, that will pay huge dividends. Looking at some striking numbers overall, and this could be a big part of the fight, Cole Miller, 2.7 strikes landed per minute compared to Nam Pham, 4.78, so he's going to land almost 2 more strikes per minute than Cole Miller, and I expect him to get in low, use his low stature, and just blast the body. Nam Pham never been submitted before, even though he's been out-grappled, and that's one thing Cole Miller has had a lot of success with, 13 wins by submission. He's a brown belt in BJJ, but keep in mind, Nam Pham is a black belt in BJJ, and he's a black belt in karate, and this transition to alpha male should help him to improve his reverse wrestling. And when it comes right down to it, I think Pham will do more, will land more, have success that way, and I think if Cole Miller has any issues making 145 again, a guy like Pham will certainly expose this. Either way, I'm going to take Nam Pham to defeat Cole Miller by decision. We move now to the first of our 4 main card predictions in the UFC's welterweight division, as where have you been? Mike Quick Swick, 14-4-0, returns to action to battle 18-10-0 DeMarcus Darkness Johnson. And yes, Mike Swick, the first thing that stands out to me in this fight, Mike Swick, he has not fought since February 6th of 2010, almost 30 months out of action. He's dealt with a number of injuries and ailments that have kept him away from competition. He did make a couple attempts to come back. Hopefully in this week that leads up to the fights, he will stay healthy and put on a good performance. Taking a quick look at what they're known for, Mike Swick comes in 7 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 4 by decision, with a loss by knockout, a loss by submission, 2 by decision. DeMarcus Johnson, on the other hand, 7 by knockout, 7 by submission, 2 by decision, but he's got some bigger numbers. He's been knocked out 3 times. He's been submitted 6 times. Mike Swick, prior to his injury issues, he was putting together a nice little run and found himself at UFC 105, battling Dan Hardy for a shot at the UFC's welterweight title. He lost that fight by decision, and then at UFC 109, he was submitted via Darce choke against Paulo Thiago. So he's lost 2 in a row coming into this fight. Prior to that, he had a 4-fight winning streak and was looking fairly good with his. And even when he fought at middleweight, his lone loss was against Yushin Okami, and he was having a pretty successful run. He ran that little skid, and the injuries have kept him out of action. He's hoping to return to his form and potentially make another run at the welterweight title. DeMarcus DeMarcus Johnson, on the other hand, coming off a submission loss to John Maguire. Prior to that, he had knocked out Clay Harvison, and the guy alternates wins and losses, and has done so for quite a while, since going all the way back to UFC 107 and UFC 112, where he had back-to-back wins, one by submission, one by knockout. He's gone every other fight over the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fights. He is due for a win based on that schedule. Big thing with Swick, again, his layoff and how long he's been out of the cage. He certainly will be training hard and looking to get back in shape, but there's nothing like actually real competition, and I'll see how he holds up there. DeMarcus Johnson seems to have this issue. On the other hand, for me, he seems to fight right into his opponent's strengths, which I do not think is a smart maneuver. The guy, he's been submitted 6 times. He has 7 wins by submission, so he certainly has skills on the ground, but that 6 wins losses by submission is a huge area. He trains with Jeremy Horn, a world-class grappler and submission fighter, so certainly working there. But against John Maguire, who we all knew his grappling game was his forte, DeMarcus Johnson fought the grappling style fight and eventually got caught in a beautiful submission maneuver where Johnson was going for a Kimura, and Maguire transitioned immediately to an armbar. It was wonderfully set up by Maguire, and he submitted him. Against Amir Sadallah, again, he got taken out by elbows there. It goes down as a submission loss. Technically, it should have been a TKO, but Johnson tapped. And he lost also to Matt Riddle by TKO. I like DeMarcus Johnson. I just don't think he's on Mike Swick's level. Mike Swick has some serious power in his hands, and he's very fast, as his name implies, Mike Quick Swick. He stopped via TKO Ben Saunders, and Ben Saunders is a very tough dude to stop. We've seen his success in Bellator of late. He stopped Ben Saunders, he knocked out Jonathan Goulet, he won a decision over Marcus Davis, a very talented boxer. He also picked up a majority decision over Josh Berkman. The guy's talented. A decision win over David Loazo, who's a pretty decent striker in his own right. At least that was back in 2006, quite a while ago. But either way, I like what Swick brings to the cage. His layoff and time away from the cage, and still his health is a question, I would have to assume, unless he might be 100% healthy, but you have to wonder how much this has taken away from him. That brings some pause to my prediction here, and it makes me wonder. But DeMarcus Johnson, I just don't think he's on Mike Quick Swick's level, and I think that will show up here. And I really think this fight will probably go into a striking battle predominantly, and I like the way Swick has success with his hands. He has good combinations, very fast. He blasts his opponents. He did have some trouble with the heavy hands of Dan Hardy and got hurt a couple times in that fight. And he got dropped by Paulo Thiago as well. But either way, I think he gets the better of DeMarcus Johnson here. And I'm going to take Mike Swick to defeat DeMarcus Johnson by knockout. We continue in the main card in the UFC's lightweight divisions. Joe J. Lo Lauzon, 27-0, battles 26-1 with 2-0 contest. Former WEC lightweight champion Jamie Varner. Taking a look at Varner, he's coming off a world-shocking UFC 146 first-round knockout over formerly undefeated Edson Barboza. He's won 3 in a row overall. Well, Joe Lauzon, on the other hand, had a 2-fight winning streak snap at UFC 144 with a brutal first-round head kick loss against Anthony Pettis. Prior to that, submission wins for Kurt Warburton and Melvin Gillard had moved him back into the upper ranks of the lightweight division. Jamie Varner took this fight with Edson Barboza on as an injury replacement. Prior to that, I said he's won 3 in a row. He's won 4 of his last 5, but the competition he's faced not nearly on the level of Joe Lauzon. He had a win over former UFC fighter Drew Fickett, and against Fickett, he picked up the victory, but Fickett has lost the majority of his fights recently, so certainly not a top-level competition. And a loss in there, it was an Ultimate Fighter reject he actually lost to in Dakota Cochran, who failed to make the show, I believe. I think he lost in the qualifying rounds, and that was a fight where Varner just looked out. I watched that fight, and Varner just looked out of place. He had some success a little bit as he tired Cochran, took advantage of him. And both these guys are known for their early surges. You look at Joe Lauzon, he's an early finisher. He has, in his career, all 21 wins have come by finish, 17 by submission, 4 by knockout. He presses hard early, but going back a couple fights against George Soteropoulos, which is a perfect prediction on my part, he pushed the action early, was getting the better of Soteropoulos with his feet like he expected he would, and then as he slowed down, Soteropoulos took advantage and eventually submitted him. Same thing going back to UFC 108 against Sam Stout. He threatened Stout early with submission attempts. Stout endured, Lauzon slowed, and Stout got the better of him with his striking and won a decision. Jamie Varner, at the same time, also a guy who has a lot of first-round finishes. His last, 5 of his last 6 fights have ended inside the first round. So certainly I think this fight's not going the distance either way. I think one of these guys is going to come out and get the better. Lauzon, as I said, he's a grappling expert with 17 wins by submission. He's a purple belt in BJJ. Jamie Varner has a wrestling base and is fairly solid there. And he has 9 wins by submission as well, but he's been tapped out 3 times, was certainly an area of concern. Either way, Varner's got some pretty powerful hands, as we saw against Barboza, just walking through and hammering Barboza and eventually stopping him. Either way, I think what this fight comes down to is that Lauzon is simply going to be the has been faced better talent of late, and if Varner is for real and is going to make a run at the title, which is a possibility, you never know. You pick up back-to-back wins over Barboza and Lauzon, you're right in it. We'll find out with this fight. Either way, I don't think he's quite there yet. And I'm going to take Joe Lauzon with his submission skills to eventually get Varner on his back, where Varner certainly has some issues. And I'm going to take Joe Lauzon to defeat Jamie Varner by submission. We move to my co-main event prediction, and the first of two fights, which could determine the next man to challenge for the UFC's light heavyweight title, and it says something a lot. If Jon Jones is still the champion, he has faced and decisively beaten all four of these men we're about to talk about, so very interesting there. But either way, in our co-main event, Lyoto, the Dragon Machida, 17-3-0, battles 15-2-0, Ryan Darth Bader. Taking a look at what they've done recently, Lyoto Machida coming off a submission defeat where he was put to sleep by the champ, Jon Jones, back at UFC 140. Prior to that, he had that front kick KO over Randy Couture at UFC 129. Ryan Bader, on the other hand, back-to-back wins. Knocked out Jason Brills at UFC 139. Probably the biggest win of his career, a decision victory over Quentin Rampage Jackson, and he's quickly put behind him the losses to Tito Ortiz and Jon Jones that were preceding these two wins. Now, Lyoto Machida, this is definitely a style clash. Ryan Bader, NCAA Division I wrestler, and he uses that very well in the cage. Lyoto Machida, the karate fighter, the striker, the point fighter, a lot of people call him. Looking at their win totals, Bader 7 wins by knockout, though 2 by submission, 2 and 5 by decision. While Machida, on the other hand, 6 wins by knockout, 2 by submission, 9 by decision. Now, Machida has some grappling experience. He's a BJJ black belt and certainly is well trained in that discipline. But what this fight comes down to is, can Bader get a hold of Machida, or can Machida stay on the outside and outstrike him? Ryan Bader against Quentin Rampage Jackson, that was a perfect matchup for Bader in the sense that Jackson's the type of guy who's going to stand right in front of you and bang. So one of two things is going to happen. Jackson's either going to hit you and hurt you, or Bader was going to be able to duck and avoid those strikes and put him on his back, and he did that with success and was able to win the fight on his ability to take him down, even though Jackson did hit him a couple times and slammed him once, which was quite impressive. Lyoto Machida, we know what he's all about. He navigates the outer realms of the cage, maintains distance, and darts in, attacks, and avoids, and that's something Bader's going to have a lot of trouble with. When Bader fought Jones and Jones was able to maintain distance, Ryan Bader had limited success striking with him and landing punches. And one thing Bader does is when he wings those wild punches, and he throws a lot of singles, not a lot of combinations, when he wings those wild punches, it takes a lot of his gas tank and slows him down. And when he starts getting tired, in the second half of the fight, his ability to score takedowns drops off significantly. We saw that against Little Nog. He was able to take him down early, but as that fight pressed on, Bader was unable to land his takedowns with as much success, and that could be an issue with Machida. Lyoto Machida comes in with an 80% takedown defense, so he's not only is he hard to get his hands, not only is he hard to get a hold of, when you get your hands on him, he's very hard to take down, which will be a huge issue for Ryan Bader. If Bader's going to beat Machida, he's going to need to time him as he comes in and land his overhand right and look to hurt him and then go from there, because Machida, we've seen him knocked out once by Shogun, and that was when Machida rushed in and Shogun countered and landed perfectly on his chin and put him to sleep. Biggest thing with Machida in this fight, he needs to not be his own worst enemy. He's going to need to make sure he puts enough on Ryan Bader. If he doesn't attack him with relative regularity like he did against Machida did against Rampage, the judges could see Bader pressing the action and chasing and give him the nod in that sense. So Machida needs to make sure he's busy enough to pick up the victory. Either way, I think he will be. And Bader's chin questionable. We saw him against in his fight with Tito Ortiz. He got caught with a quick shot and dropped him, and we all know what Cheetah's capable of. We saw him do it against Thiago Silva. We saw him do it against Rashad Evans. He's able to land with big power and put guys to sleep, and I think he has the more diverse striking repertoire, and he should be able to keep this fight standing as far as I am concerned, and that's what it comes down to. He'll have a speed advantage too over Ryan Bader, who should be a little bit stronger, but that won't play a factor if he cannot get his hands on Machida. Either way, I will take Lyoto Machida to defeat Ryan Bader, and I'll take Machida to win it by knockout. We move down to the main event of the evening. Is Mauricio Shogun, who at 26-0 battles Brandon the Truth Vera, 12-5-0 with 1 no contest. And the thing that keeps playing through my mind when I think of this fight is the Willy Wonka song, I've got a golden ticket, I've got a golden ticket, because that's what Brandon Vera has. Brandon Vera has done anything but earn this opportunity to be in a main event and potentially be looking at a title shot with a win, maybe another win after this one. But if he beats Shogun, he certainly returns back to relevance. Shogun, who coming off a decision loss in a huge fight of the year 2011 against Dan Henderson. Prior to that, pretty much the opposite performance, where he shut down Forrest Griffin in just over a minute and a half at UFC 134, and then of course lost the title at UFC 128 to Jon Jones by TKO in the 3rd round. Brandon Vera, on the other hand, he is coming off a win over Elliot Marshall at UFC 137. He won that fight, but he nearly got knocked out. He nearly got submitted. Certainly questions going back earlier in that he lost a fight to Thiago Silva, which was eventually overturned due to Silva testing positive, which snapped his 3-fight losing streak. That included losses to Randy Couture and the current light heavyweight champion, Jon Jones. Now, both of these guys are predominantly strikers. Mauricio Shogun Rua has won 17 of his 20 wins by knockout. Brandon Vera, 7 of his 12 wins by knockout. So expect these guys to stand and bang. But it doesn't mean we're not going to see some action on the ground. Shogun comes into this fight averaging 2.41 takedowns per fight. So certainly, and he averages almost 50% of his takedown. It lands almost 50% of his takedown attempts. So certainly capable of doing so. And we saw him against Dan Henderson, taking Henderson down and putting him on his back. Brandon Vera comes from a Greco-Roman wrestling background, and he is also he's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So if this fight goes to the ground, it's not going to shock me. But I fully expect to see a lot of standing and trading. Now, Shogun Rua, very good striker, has those excellent kicks. But we did not see that against Dan Henderson, and we have to wonder about his health. Are his knee surgeries and all the pressure and general wear and tear he's experienced through a long career of going through these ridiculous battles back in Pride, now in the UFC, are they taking their toll? And whether the fanboys of Shogun want to admit it or not, he's not the fighter he used to be. And against a technical striker, I think in most senses he's going to get picked apart, and people are going to point, oh, look at the Lyoto Machida fight. Well, in the Lyoto Machida fight, he did excellent in both fights, the loss and the win. He looked very good, especially in the first fight, even though he lost, using those body kicks to blast to Machida and cut off the cage. But against Dan Henderson, a far inferior striker, he basically stood in front of Henderson and slammed away, and he got tagged several times. No doubting his heart, no doubting his chin. But against Henderson, he could have easily stood on the outside, used his legs and speed to pick Henderson apart, and instead he chose to walk in there and trade with him, and it cost him that fight. And had he been smarter earlier, maybe won a round or two or early in the fight, he probably would have taken it from a very gassed Dan Henderson. Brandon Vera, on the other hand, Muay Thai striker, very diverse striking repertoire as well. He also has excellent kicks. In his losses to Randy Couture, afterwards, Couture said he hit me with a body kick, and it felt like all of my organs moved because Brandon Vera hits so hard. And that's something he's going to look to do in this fight. He needs to blast Shogun with body kicks, because if Shogun has any conditioning issues, especially over a 5-round matchup, body kicks and shots to the midsection are going to take away that conditioning and are going to take it away quickly. Also, Vera does those little little side kicks to the knees and legs. I expect him to do the same thing against Shogun. You might not feel it is legal, but either way, you might feel it's cheap, but it certainly is legal that Vera is going to attack Shogun's legs and knees and look to maybe take away some of his speed and movement by damaging those already surgically repaired joints. Either way, this fight should be very interesting. If Vera wins this, I think there is a path for Vera contention. I think if Vera beats Shogun, he will be smart next to call it Forrest Griffin, another winnable fight for him. And then at that point, he'll have to go for a top contender like a Phil, or another top-ranked fighter like a Phil Davis or a Lyoto Machida should he beat Ryan Bader. Either way, Vera feels he could get back in there with the champion Jon Jones, who he's already lost to, and that fight only lasted 3 minutes and 19 seconds. But of course, it wasn't for the title. And Vera formerly claimed to be on the verge of being a 2-division champion when he was fighting heavyweight. He thought he could win both titles. He's never even fought for a title, so certainly this could be his last hurrah. Shogun Rua, if he's going to hang on to relevancy in the division, he needs to win this fight. If he loses this fight to Brandon Vera, who I don't even have ranked in my top 21 contenders on the website, if he doesn't win this fight, he will certainly drop down significantly, and he might main event it one more time, but his chances of getting a shot at Jon Jones will be all but gone, and his significant paydays will certainly start to decrease in number. Either way, if Shogun and Machida both win their fights, it could set up a hell of a rematch that could lead to the winner of that getting a title shot as far as I'm concerned, but certainly that would be a very fun fight, and I would have no problem seeing the winner of a Shogun-Machida fight challenging for the title again. Either way, the big thing that this fight comes down to me is when Brandon Vera fought Elliot Marshall, when it was at stated distance, Vera had success. When Marshall rushed him and put pressure on him and did not allow Vera to set up and think, that's when Vera got in trouble. That's when Vera got clipped and got hurt. And that's what Shogun has a tendency to do. Some people see it as a bad habit. In this fight, I think it actually is the answer to what you need to do against somebody like Brandon Vera. Shogun go berserker, push the action, put hands on Vera's chin, not allow him to set up, not allow him to think, and I think that's what's going to come down to. And I think as a result, Shogun's going to clip Brandon Vera. If Elliot Marshall can hurt Vera, Mauricio Shogun Rua can hurt Brandon Vera. So my prediction is Mauricio Shogun Rua to defeat Brandon Vera by knockout. So those are my predictions for UFC on Fox 4 Shogun versus Vera. You can also go to my website and buy my bet pack. They include all kinds of fight bet breakdowns. I will give you my 5 confidence picks, the 5 fights I feel most confident about, which I've had a lot of success recently with that. I'll also give you my 5 value picks based on who I think has a chance to win and who also pays the best, a combination of those two. I put some parlays together, I do some props, so check out my bet packs for $10 on the website. And of course, if I start having a bad run, I'm coming up a bet show, if I have a bad run and you've been buying them all along, you'll probably get a free one thrown your way in the near future. But I put a lot of work and watched a lot of footage for this event, so I certainly feel confident going in. I should have a very good night. Either way, we could get a little clarity in the light heavyweight division as John Jones currently set up to take on Dan Henderson. We could have the next title contender come out of this show. As far as I'm concerned, I think, as I said before, the winner of the main event, co-main event should face off. The UFC needs to focus on this. Daniel Cormier. If Cormier gets by Frank Mir in his final Strikeforce heavyweight appearance, I think Daniel Cormier versus John Jones for the light heavyweight title makes a lot of sense. And considering what John Jones has done, if he gets by Dan Henderson, he will have run through the majority of former champions. After Chuck Liddell dropped the title, we looked at a period of time where it went from Rampage to Forrest to Rashad to Machida to Shogun. And of those 5 champions, John Jones has defeated 4 of them, with Griffin being the lone one he hasn't faced yet. Now he's looking to take out the former Strikeforce and Pride champion, Dan Henderson, and you really have to wonder at this point who's left. Maybe Alexander Gustafsson, but I really think Daniel Cormier would be a very interesting and high-profile fight if Cormier can make light heavyweight. Either way, good fight, UFC on Fox 4. We've got a lot of MMA action coming your way in the near future, so please check out my website. Let me know what you think. Comment, sign up at the forums. We'll discuss stuff there. Buy the bet packs. Thank you very much to all of my sponsors. I'm Scott Johnson, Kamikaze Overdrive MMA. Thank you very much for listening.